When the light in your house seems dim, and you throw it away, what will you do if you realize that you cannot replace it after throwing it away? Never. What if it is the light, or the star in your life? And it turns out that you can never replace it. Long before the wide dusty roads connected the distant towns, and long before strangers began visiting the villages with strange machines and noisy motorcycles, there existed a quiet village known as Umuokoro. Umuokoro was surrounded by thick forests and tall palm trees whose shadows stretched across the land every evening when the sun began to sink behind the hills. A narrow river flowed beside the village, providing water for cooking, washing, and farming. Life in Umuokoro followed the rhythm of the earth. At dawn, the farmers left for their farms carrying hoes on their shoulders. Women gathered at the market square to sell vegetables, palm oil, and roasted corn. Children ran barefoot through dusty paths while chasing one another with loud laughter. But among all the people who lived in Umuokoro, there was one person whose name was known by every man, woman, and child. Her name was Amaka. Amaka was the only daughter of Okeke, a humble farmer known for his honesty and peaceful nature. From the day Amaka was born, the elders often said the gods had placed something special upon her life. As she grew older, her beauty became impossible to ignore. Her skin glowed like polished bronze under the sunlight. Her eyes were deep and calm like the river at dawn. And when she smiled, it felt as though the whole village suddenly became brighter. By the time Amaka reached womanhood, young men from Umuokoro and even neighboring villages began visiting her father's compound with gifts. Some brought baskets of yams. Others brought palm wine. A few even brought goats, hoping their offerings would impress her father. But Amaka turned them all away. Not because she was proud, but because her heart had already chosen someone. His name was Chaik. Chaik was the son of a poor palm wine tapper. Unlike the other young men who tried to impress Amaka with gifts and promises, Chaik rarely spoke loudly about his feelings. He was quiet, humble, and hard-working. Many villagers believed Chaik had no chance of marrying a woman as beautiful as Amaka. Some even mocked him secretly. But love does not follow the rules of wealth or status. From the first day Amaka and Chaik spoke at the village stream, something powerful connected their hearts. Soon it became common to see them walking together along the narrow path that led to the river. Amaka would carry a clay pot on her head while Chaik walked beside her, sometimes helping her carry firewood or fruits from the bush. Whenever they laughed together, the sound carried through the trees like music. Even the elderly women who pounded cassava in the village square often smiled when they saw the two young lovers passing by. But not everyone was happy about their love. In Umuokoro, the most powerful man after the elders was the village chief, Chief Nadi. Chief Nadi had one son. His name was Kaneo. Kaneo grew up knowing he was the son of the most powerful man in the village. Because of this, he believed the world existed to satisfy his desires. If Kaneo admired a goat in another man's compound, the goat eventually became his. If Kaneo wanted a piece of farmland, the owner usually surrendered it without protest. And when Kaneo saw Amaka for the first time, he immediately decided she would one day become his wife. For months he tried to win her heart. He sent gifts to her father. He promised wealth and comfort. He even told the elders he intended to marry her. But Amaka refused him every time. Her heart already belonged to Chaik. Kaneo's pride could not accept this humiliation. Inside him, a quiet anger began to grow. And though he never openly confronted Chaik, he watched the young couple from afar with burning jealousy. One evening, as the sky turned orange and purple, Amaka prepared to fetch water from the stream. She lifted her clay pot and stepped onto the narrow path that led into the forest. As expected, Chaik soon joined her. "You should not walk alone this late," he said gently. Amaka smiled. With you beside me, I fear nothing. The path to the stream passed through tall grasses and giant trees whose branches formed thick shadows above the ground. Birds were returning to their nests, and the cool evening breeze carried the scent of fresh leaves. Halfway to the stream stood a massive Udala tree, older than any living person in Omuokoro. The tree's branches spread wide like a giant umbrella. Many travelers rested beneath its shade during long journeys. That evening, Amaka and Chaik decided to sit there for a moment before continuing to the stream. They talked about their future. Chaik spoke about building a small house for them one day. Amaka laughed shyly and said she would fill the house with children. The moment was peaceful. Romantic. The quiet closeness between them slowly turned into something deeper. Something passionate. And under the wide branches of the ancient Udala tree, their love overcame their caution. They shared a moment of intimacy that neither of them would ever forget. But what they did not know was that they were not alone. High above them, hidden among the thick branches of the Udala tree, someone else had been resting. That person was Kaneo. He had climbed the tree earlier that evening to escape the heat and drink palm wine in silence. From that high branch, he saw everything that happened between Amaka and Chaik. At first he watched in disbelief. Then anger flooded his heart like a raging fire. By the time the lovers finished their moment and prepared to stand up, Kaneo's jealousy had turned into uncontrollable rage. Suddenly a loud sound came from above. Before Amaka and Chaik could react, Kaneo jumped down from the tree and landed heavily on the ground before them. Chaik froze. Amaka gasped in shock. Kaneo's eyes were burning with fury. "You shameless dog," he roared at Chaik. Before Chaik could speak, Kaneo grabbed him violently by the collar. "You dare touch the woman meant for me?" Chaik tried to defend himself, but Kaneo pushed him hard and threatened to beat him to death if he did not run. Realizing the danger, Chaik reluctantly fled into the forest. Then Kaneo slowly turned toward Amaka. His voice became cold. "Kneel." Amaka trembled. Fear forced her to drop to her knees beneath the giant tree. Kaneo stared at her for a long moment. Then something unexpected happened. His anger softened. For the first time, Kaneo spoke not as an arrogant chief's son, but as a desperate man in love. "Amaka," he said quietly, "I have loved you longer than you know." Tears filled her eyes as he continued speaking. "I wanted to make you the most honored woman in this village. The wife of a chief's son." His voice became heavier. "But today, you broke my heart." Amaka tried to explain herself. But Kaneo continued speaking, his words slowly changing from anger to persuasion. The night grew darker. The forest became silent. And beneath the same Udala tree where Amaka had been moments before with Chaik, Kaneo slowly convinced her to surrender to him. That night would change everything. The forest had already grown dark when Amaka finally rose from the ground beneath the great Udala tree. Her body trembled, not only from what had just happened, but from the confusion raging inside her heart. Kaneo stood beside the tree, adjusting his clothes as if nothing unusual had happened. "Remember what I told you," he said calmly. "You belong to me." Amaka did not answer. She quietly lifted her clay pot and walked toward the stream with slow steps. The night insects had begun their songs, and the path ahead seemed darker than usual. When she returned home later that night, her mother noticed the sadness in her eyes. "What troubles you, my daughter?" she asked gently. Amaka forced a weak smile. "Nothing, Mama. I am just tired." But inside her heart, something felt wrong. She knew the night under the Udala tree had changed her life in ways she could not yet understand. Days passed. Life in the village continued as usual. Amaka tried to return to her normal routine, but she felt distant from everything around her. Even Chaik noticed the change. One evening when they met near the stream, he asked softly, "Amaka, what is happening to you? You seem far away." She looked at him but could not find the courage to tell him the truth. Instead she shook her head. "It is nothing, Chike." But deep inside, she feared the truth would destroy everything. 2 days later, something else happened that Amaka never expected. Her elder brother had traveled to a nearby village for farm work, and his friend Tchukwu came to visit their compound in the afternoon. Tchukwu was a tall man who often joked loudly and behaved with careless confidence. Amaka's mother had gone to the farm, leaving Amaka alone at home when he arrived. "I came to see your brother," he said. "He is not home," Amaka replied. But Tchukwu did not leave. Instead he sat down inside the compound and began talking casually. At first the conversation seemed harmless. But slowly his tone changed. His eyes began to linger on Amaka in a way that made her uncomfortable. She stood up to go inside the house. But before she could move away, Tchukwu grabbed her arm. "What are you doing?" Amaka cried in fear. But the compound was empty. There was no one nearby to hear her voice. What happened next was something Amaka would carry in her heart for many years. When it was over, Tchukwu quickly left the compound as if nothing had happened. Amaka remained there on the ground, shaking and broken. Fear and shame sealed her lips. She told no one. 2 weeks later, Amaka began to notice changes in her body. At first she ignored them. But as the days passed, the signs became impossible to deny. One evening her mother looked closely at her and suddenly gasped. "Amaka, are you pregnant?" The words fell like thunder inside the compound. Amaka could not answer. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Within hours, the news had spread through the entire village of Umuokoro. The girl who had once been admired by everyone was now the center of the greatest scandal the village had ever seen. The village gong sounded early the next morning. All the elders gathered in the village square beneath the ancient Irako tree where serious matters were judged. Amaka stood in the center of the gathering with her parents beside her. Her head was lowered in shame. Soon the 2 men suspected of being responsible arrived. Chike stood quietly on one side. Kaneo stood confidently on the other. The oldest elder, Pa-Ease, raised his walking stick and spoke. "Amaka, daughter of Okeke, you carry a child. The honor of this village demands that the father of this child must be known." He turned to Chike first. "Chike, are you responsible for this pregnancy?" Chike looked shocked. He shook his head slowly. "No, great elders. I am not." Murmurs filled the crowd. Then Pa-Ease turned to Kaneo. "Kaneo, son of Chief Nadi, what do you say?" Kaneo stepped forward boldly. "I have nothing to do with that pregnancy." The crowd erupted into confusion. The elders whispered among themselves. Without modern science, the truth could not easily be proven. Finally Pa-Ease raised his staff again. "There is only one way to reveal the truth." The entire crowd fell silent. "We will invite a seer." 3 days later, a mysterious spiritualist arrived from a distant land. He was an old man with white chalk markings on his face and a necklace of cowries around his neck. The villagers gathered once again in the square. The spiritualist placed strange objects on the ground: bones, stones, and carved wooden symbols. He began chanting softly while shaking a rattle made from dried gourds. The air became heavy with tension. After a long ritual, the spiritualist suddenly stopped. His eyes opened slowly. "The child in this woman's womb," he began, "does not belong to either of the 2 men standing here." A wave of shock moved through the crowd. The elders looked at one another in disbelief. "If the child belongs to neither of them," Pa-Ease demanded, "then who is the father?" The spiritualist raised one finger. There is a third man. Amaka's heart stopped. Her secret rushed back like a storm. The memory of that terrible afternoon with Tchukwu flooded her mind. Slowly, with tears pouring down her face, Amaka confessed everything. The crowd gasped in horror. The elders were furious. Not only because of the pregnancy, but because the situation had become a terrible taboo in the village. To them, the entire matter had brought shame upon Umuokoro. Without mercy, they announced their decision. Amaka, Pais declared, you can no longer remain in this village. The words felt like knives in her heart. You must leave Umuokoro before the next sunrise. Her parents cried bitterly, but the decision of the elders could not be challenged. That night, Amaka packed the few belongings she owned. Before dawn, she left the village she had known her entire life. Amaka walked for hours along dusty paths until she reached a neighboring village called Abanagu. The villagers there were kinder. A widowed woman offered her a small hut to stay in. Months later, Amaka gave birth to a baby boy. Holding the child in her arms, she made a promise. No matter what happens, my son, we will build a better life. And she kept that promise. Amaka began selling vegetables in the small Abanaga market. Her kindness attracted many customers. Her intelligence helped her grow her small trade into something bigger. Years passed. Her vegetable trade turned into a large food supply business. Soon traders from nearby towns began visiting Abanagu because of Amaka's growing enterprise. With the money she earned, she built shops, hired workers, and helped develop the village market. Abanagu slowly transformed into a busy trading center. Visitors, merchants, and travelers filled the streets. And at the center of it all was Amaka. The same woman once chased away in shame. The people of Abanagu respected Amaka deeply. They admired her strength. They honored her generosity. Soon they began calling her the Queen of Abanagu. Her parents eventually moved to live with her. Her son grew up strong and intelligent. Life had turned in a direction no one in Umuokoro had imagined. Meanwhile, back in Umuokoro, things were very different. The village began to decline. Trade slowed. Young people moved away in search of opportunities. The market became empty. Soon rumors reached them about the incredible success of Abanagu. And every rumor had the same name at its center. Amaka. The elders realized something painful. The woman they once chased away had become the source of prosperity for another village. Jealousy slowly turned into regret. Finally the elders gathered again beneath the Irako tree. This time their mission was different. They selected respected chiefs and elders and sent them to Abanagu. Their task was simple. They were to kneel before the woman they once rejected, and beg her to return home. When the delegation from Umuokoro arrived in Abanagu, they were amazed by what they saw. Busy markets. Thriving businesses. Crowds of traders and visitors. All because of Amaka. When they finally stood before her, the elders bowed their heads. Daughter of Umuokoro, they said humbly, we wronged you. Our village is suffering. Please forgive us and return home. Amaka looked at them quietly. The memories of humiliation, exile, and pain passed through her mind. But she also remembered the strength she had discovered during those difficult years. The entire room waited for her answer. Would she forgive them? Or would she leave them to face the consequences of their cruelty? Amaka slowly rose from her seat. And with calm authority, she spoke. Sometimes, she said softly, the seed that is rejected by the soil grows into the strongest tree in another land. The elders lowered their heads in silence. And in that moment, they understood a painful truth. They had rejected their greatest blessing.